Michael Shermer, next week you'll be having a talk in Bochum. The title of the talk is based on the title of one of your books, Why People Believe Weird Things. So give me some spoilers. Why do they?
Well, the general answer is that we believe things for emotional reasons, for reasons that are not based in reason or evidence. Maybe we were raised to believe that particular belief, whatever it is, a religious belief or a political belief, and it works for us. And then we back into it after the fact, the reasons and evidence for that belief. So in other words, it's backwards, the way scientists think, like, well, I'm just going to compile the evidence and then I'll follow it wherever it leads, and that's what I'll accept as true, provisionally. But that's not how our brains work. Our brains are designed to be more like lawyers, defending our client, the client being our beliefs in this metaphor, as opposed to science, which does not come natural. Science is a process of assuming that we're probably wrong about most of our beliefs, and therefore we have to be skeptical. So we start with the Null Hypothesis. Whatever your claim is, it's probably not true. Now the burden of proof is on you to convince me that it is. Go ahead, give it your best shot. And that doesn't come easy. I mean, it's hard to give up your beliefs. It's hard to open them up to other people's criticisms. But you have to do it in science, because if you don't, somebody else will.
If you had to identify the worst mechanisms in our brain that are responsible for making us believe in conspiracy theories or gods, what would you say that is?
Yep. Well, there's a couple of factors going. The simplest one is a confirmation bias. These cognitive biases that I just sort of described as shaping the way we look at the world to make it fit with what we already believe. Confirmation bias is the mother of all of these cognitive biases, where you look for and find confirming evidence for what you already believe and you ignore the disconfirming evidence. Okay, that's sort of the first layer. Above that is a sort of a more general process of just trying to have a kind of a global understanding of the world and make sense of it. So the world, for the most part, is pretty chaotic. There's a lot of variables going on that cause things to happen. Randomness and chance is a factor that we don't see most of that. Our brains are not wired to look for big patterns. We're more wired to look for little patterns to just explain things. So particularly with things like economics and politics and society, conspiracy theories are appealing because they're simple. They only involve a couple of factors that have to come together. There's some person or thing behind the curtain pulling the strings, making things happen, wars and economies and things like that. And the truth is, it's not like that. It's much more chaotic and complex, but we just are not wired to see it that way.
Okay, what do you think? Why do some people seem almost addicted to believing weird things, while others seem to have a more skeptical nature?
So there are temperament and personality differences among us on almost anything you want to talk about, not just height and weight and skin color, whatever, but also the propensity to believe things or be more skeptical. And so you can picture it as kind of a bell curve. Some are over here, they'll believe anything. Some are over here, they're kind of curmudgeonly, they don't believe anything. We want to strike a balance in the middle is what we're after. You want to be open-minded enough to accept new ideas when they come along. If they turn out to be true and science tests them, you got to be open to that. But on the other hand, you don't want to be so open-minded that you believe every crazy thing that comes along. And so the rub is finding that balance, and the balance is to be found through evidence and reason, through the empirical methods of science and the logical reasoning tools of philosophy, and we just do the best we can. From there, then, you provisionally conclude, I think this might be true, small t, true, for now. And we'll see, maybe I'll change my mind later when the evidence changes. If not, then we'll stick with that.
Let's talk about your own belief in weird things. As a teenager, you became an evangelical Christian, and you even studied theology. So you really know what it means to get into the process of believing weird things. What made you become a fundamentalist Christian, and even more important, how did you get out of it?
Yes. Could this happen to me? Yes. Well, I got into it not through my parents. Most people grow up being religious or not. In my case, it was not. My parents weren't religious. They weren't anti-religious. That just wasn't a thing. But my peer group was. So we know from the studies of developmental psychology that parental influence starts to fade in your early teens, and peer group influence becomes very much more powerful. And that was the case for me. In the early 70s, all my friends were becoming evangelical Christians. And there was kind of the growing evangelical movement, the whole Jesus movement, the kind of hippie singing songs and having little communal gatherings and so on. That was kind of a social thing to do, so I did it just for fun since my friends were doing it. But then I took it seriously. It's like, okay, if I'm going to really believe this, I should study this. What's this book again? The Bible. Oh yeah, I should read this thing and study it. So I started doing Bible classes and reading books about the Bible and the Bible itself. And then I went to Pepperdine University. It's a Christian school in Malibu, and it's a good school, but you're in a bubble. And when you're in the bubble, everything makes sense. It's all logical and internally coherent and consistent, and yep, that made perfect sense. Then I went to graduate school because I wanted to be a college professor and teach psychology. I'd switched majors from theology to psychology, and so there I encountered science. And so I wanted to be a college professor. You have to have a graduate degree, so I go to graduate school, and there I discovered that there was this no bubble. My fellow students and professors, they weren't believers, or maybe they were. I mean, no one talked about it. It was just not important. And in addition to taking science courses, I also took courses outside of my field in anthropology, for example, and this was an eye-opener. And I also kind of went through my Joseph Campbell stage of comparative world religions, comparative mythology, the hero with 1,000 faces, and I realized, oh my God, there's 1,000 different gods and 10,000 different religions. What are the chances that I got the right one and all these other people were wrong? They're probably not likely. Maybe none of them are right. Maybe they're all socially constructed. So thinking like an anthropologist or a social psychologist, you would think, okay, the reason these people believe this is because that's their culture. They're born in this area of the globe at this particular period of time. This is what their culture tells them to believe, so that's what they believe, obviously. Why can't I apply that to my own Christian religion? So I did. And then other things like the problem of evil. It's like, yeah, there's some serious issues with theology here that I don't think the Christians have gotten right. And by the way, why did the Jews not believe in Jesus? They believe in the same God, same book. They even believe that there's going to be a Messiah. They just don't think Jesus was it. And you can't say, well, these people are just, these rabbis are just not very well read. Or no, these are the most learned people in the whole religious community that Christians respect. So they don't believe it. Why? Because the arguments aren't that good. So I just abandoned the whole thing, not in any public way. Again, the whole atheism movement now is big. There was no such movement back in the 70s. I just quit talking about it. And I took off my little ichthus. I had a little Christian fish with the little Greek symbols, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, that my girlfriend had given me. And I'm like, you know what, I think I'm kind of hypocritical wearing this. I took it off. And I just quit talking about Jesus at dinner with my family. They were relieved. And evangelicals, to be an evangelical, you're supposed to evangelize. That's what you do. You go out and knock on doors. I want to tell you about Jesus. And I quit doing that, I think much to the relief of my friends.
But what you described was a very rational process. But when you abandon your own faith, there's something on the emotional, in your emotion going on, because you don't have God anymore. Did you find that difficult?
No, actually, it was liberating for me. Yeah, so first of all, I was young, in my early 20s. I wasn't married, I didn't have a house and a family, and all my friends and coworkers all go to church, and I'm left by myself on Sunday morning with nothing to do. No, it wasn't like that at all. Most of my new friends in science, they didn't go to church either. They weren't believers. So I didn't lose a community, and my family wasn't religious. I have sympathies for people that are older, middle-aged, family, kids, coworkers. They live in a little town where everybody goes to church, and they're sitting there going, well, I don't believe anymore. What do I do? I have sympathy for those people. I didn't have to go through that. Plus, I live in Southern California. It's a pretty liberal, open community. There's not a lot of pressure to be religious there. I'm more sympathetic to the people in the Deep South, for example, and other Midwest communities where everybody believes, and or maybe they don't, but you can't say it. So there, for me, it was liberating, and also in the sense that science kind of offers you this worldview in which you can participate. We don't know the answers, the ultimate answers to the big questions. You try to figure it out. You know, maybe you'll be the one. I'm like, me? Okay, I'll work on that. That sounds cool. I get to be part of this.
There was a very intense experience for you at the time you were about to give up phase, and that was a girlfriend, or your girlfriend had an accident, and she was disabled afterwards. And what do you think, why do some people get out of situations like that with a stronger phase, while others, including you, lose theirs?
Yeah, for me, I had already pretty much given up on the Christian religion and the idea that there was a God. But, you know, I felt so bad for my girlfriend Maureen, who I wrote about this in The Believing Brain. You know, she was in a car accident, broke her back. She's paralyzed. And this is really pretty traumatic to see somebody in a hospital. I mean, she's in this bed hanging upside down, strapped in, where they're trying to pull her spine apart, and they're putting her in these oxygen tanks to try to get more oxygen. And, you know, it's just for months and months and months. It's really depressing. And so, you know, at some point I just, I got down on, you know, on my knee, is like, okay, God, if you're there, you know, this sweet woman, she does not deserve this. If you're, you know, just do it. Just heal this woman. Just make it right. And, you know, of course, nothing happened. Now, this isn't a test. You know, I didn't think anything would happen. But if it did, I'd be, you know, grateful and thinking, okay, maybe there is something. But of course, nothing happened. She's still paralyzed to this day, and that's a little, to me, a little vignette of a larger problem of evil. You know, why, if God is all powerful and all good and so on, do bad things happen? Now, I'm not talking about homicides and, well, those are sinners, or drug addicts. You know, they're just weak in temperament, and they need to find Jesus. I'm not talking about human volition and free will and bad choices. I'm talking about like childhood leukemia, or, you know, children who die in hurricanes and tsunamis and so on. Why? What's the moral value of that for God in the universe? I think that's troubling. I've never heard a good answer to it. Theologians, they write learned tomes about this endlessly. They don't have a good answer to it, in my opinion. And that, for me, ultimately was the final straw.
But you, as a psychologist, why do you think that some people, lose their faith because they start questioning, and they start to see the evil, or the so-called evil in this, and others say, wow, thank you, God, she's not dead.
Right.
And even have a stronger phase afterwards.
Yeah.
Why is that?
We don't know. For example, after the Holocaust, there was much discussion among theologians. You know, a lot of Jews said, you know what, I don't think there's a God. There's no way God would allow this to happen to our people. Others got more religious. It's an individual thing depending on your particular life path. And so, you know, social scientists can only understand so many variables, you know, genetics, upbringing, culture, and so on. At some point, there's your personal pathway through life that, you know, got bounced around through 1,000 different effects that only you know, and I can't have access. No one has access to that. And I think a lot of it depends on that, and also your temperament, and just again what your propensity is to believe in the supernatural or not. You know, there are fantasy-prone personalities, people that are more likely to see in the trees or the wind some kind of agency or force, or in random chance events there's some kind of, you know, universal force that's directing things, or something, kind of a cosmic karma. Some people are more inclined to believe that than others, and so I think those who see evil are more like that, are more likely to see, oh, this is somehow God sending me a message or something like that. Others not.
Okay. Today, most of your work is dedicated to teach people critical, skeptical thinking. Why is it important that people think skeptically?
Yeah, so my course I teach, for example, at Chapman University is called Skepticism 101. How to Think Like a Scientist is the subtitle. And there I'm just teaching kids to employ the best tools we have of empirical science and philosophical reason and logic, and just ask yourself, how do you know it's true? What is true? How do we know what truth is? You know, and so I rifle through a whole bunch of claims, You know, there's 42 people in the room right now. How can we test if that's true or not? Well, we can count them, you know, and okay, there's 41, I was wrong, yeah, or whatever. And then, you know, the Big Bang happened, or evolution happened, or, you know, Jesus was resurrected from the dead. You know, these are all claims that we can address using the best tools of science. The fact that it happened in the past, it doesn't matter, it's still science. We know this from the study of historical geology or astronomy, studying the evolution of stars. These are past events. You know, we can be scientific about that. So I think we can apply these tools to absolutely everything, including moral questions. And so that's kind of my mission, is let's apply the tools of science and reason to everything and go from there. The reason is because that's the world we live in. You know, we are the product of the Enlightenment and this massive change in centuries ago of rejecting dogma and authority, which is still with us, but far less than it used to be, and continuing that arc, to push that moral arc, which I think is driven primarily by science and reason, not by religion.
Before we go to your moral arc, let's go back to the problems of non-skeptical thinking. In 2011, you wrote a book with another beautiful title, From Ghosts and Gods to Politics and Conspiracies. So do you think there is a direct connection between religious thinking and the problem we face today, that politics are influenced and even made by fake news and conspiracy theories?
Oh, for sure. That's the subtitle you just read there, To the Believing Brain. And there I'm trying to say that all of these different branches of knowledge, say, or fields, you know, politics, religion, economics, ideology, they're all just beliefs that we hold in our brains. and so we have to understand the kind of cognitive science of belief. How is it that we form beliefs of any kind? Okay, so there are links there, and you know, the propensity to, again, to find patterns in the world in random chaos and say, I think there's something behind there. Now let's address, you mentioned conspiracy theories. Okay, these are kind of back in the news. Trump thinks everything is a conspiracy, and he himself is a kind of a conspiracy. I mean, you know, that we know for sure, not just him, that all, you know, politicians, they lie, they conspire to do things without our permission that sometimes are not even legal, including Obama, Mr. Transparency. You know, all the NSA activities that the WikiLeaks revealed that were going on. That's a kind of conspiracy. So, you know, when people ask, why do people believe conspiracy theories? There's something wrong with them, like it's a disorder. Well, yeah, maybe there's some of these propensities to believe weird things that we can apply there because they're obviously not true. You know, Elvis is still alive or whatever. Yeah, those are crazy.
Well, he is.
You saw him yesterday.
I've seen him on ISS. Haven't you seen the picture on ISS?
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah. But on the other hand, one reason people believe conspiracies is because there are conspiracies. You know, Watergate was a conspiracy. President Lincoln was assassinated by a conspiracy. World War I, here we are in Berlin celebrating the 100th anniversary yesterday of the end of the First World War. It was started by the assassination of the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand by a cabal, a conspiracy of these Serbian nationalists, group called the Black Hand, and they conspired to assassinate him for their own political purposes, and this launched one of the second or third worst war of all time. Okay, that's a conspiracy. Okay, they're real. So here again, we're back to the, how do you know if it's true or not? Because some things might be true, some are not, and so again, it depends on the evidence. In the case of conspiracies, you know, how many people have to be involved, how many elements have to come together, what is it specifically targeted to do, and so on. And you can kind of start to discriminate between those that are probably true, those that are probably not true. So we have to apply that to any claim.
Okay, now let's come to the moral arc. How science and reason lead humanity to a truth. Your book has just been published in German. And in that book you claim that skeptical or scientific thinking can help us to make a better world, and that it has already done so.
Yeah.
How that?
Yep. Well, so my argument starts with the scientific revolution and the discovery that the universe is knowable and it's governed by natural laws that we can understand. So it begins with the physical world, you know, Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, Newton. and Newton unifying the physical world and say, okay, it's all governed by a handful of these equations and these laws of nature related to gravity. That then quickly trickled down during the Enlightenment to saying, well, wait, maybe everything is governed by natural laws. Our bodies are governed by forces and laws, that the economy is, political systems, history, everything can be studied under this kind of worldview program that things are happening out there, we don't understand them, but we can understand them. Let's figure out what the laws are and then apply them to changing the world. So this is what the Enlightenment humanist movement was all about. It's like, let's take what we know and apply it to human societies. So there were efforts, for example, to understand the economy. Where does wealth come from? This was a question that was baffling to people, and you know, people running countries and economies like, I have no idea. We just have to accumulate as much gold and silver as we can so that we have more than the other guys. And then, you know, Adam Smith publishes this book in 1776 on the Wealth of Nations and goes, okay, no, actually, it's a system that's complex but governed by certain forces that are fairly simple, you know, the invisible hand and all that. And so ever since then, we've said, okay, let's apply the best tools of science to understanding society so we can change it and make it better. So my argument in the moral arc is that we've done this across the board. I mean, there's a reason why there's more democracies now than ever before. We're up to like 118 liberal democracies now. You know, a century ago there were none. You know, women couldn't vote anywhere. If you have a democracy in which half the people, adult population, can't vote, that's not a democracy. Okay, so now you know, women can vote in every country in the world, including Saudi Arabia. Wow. Okay, so why is that happening? It's not random. You know, there's forces behind it, and the forces have to do with reason and the scientific discovery that women are no different than men in that sense. They want freedom, autonomy, they want to have a say in how the country is run and so on. Okay, so we figured that out. It may not have gone that way, but it did. And so across the board, I claim that's what we've been doing. Now, religious people claim, well, no, religion's been the driving force. No, if you look at the actual historical events as they unfolded, religion's always behind the curve. They're always sort of following behind. The wave is cresting this way, and religion's kind of being pulled up like that, and they're always behind. So while it's true you can find some isolated religious leaders that, say, drove for the abolition of slavery, the Quakers, for example, or William Wilberforce in England. But they are the exception to the rule. Their biggest opponents when they were fighting for the abolition of slavery were their fellow Christians who were going, oh, no, it's right there in the Bible. Slavery is great. This is exactly what God wants. That's why he put the blacks in Africa, so we can take them from there and bring them over here and enslave them. They don't have souls. They had all these crazy arguments that today wouldn't hold water, but they did then. Okay, so it wasn't religion that kind of opened our eyes to that. It was science and philosophy and this whole idea of universal rights, that people have rights. Where does that come from? Okay, these arguments about natural rights. You know, these are philosophical, secular arguments that drove that.
Okay. In your book, you also claim that today we're living in the best time and the most moral time mankind has seen so far. Some people, or many people, I guess, wouldn't agree with you. When you watch the news, you might have the idea, Michael Shermer is not really right about that. Why do you think they don't agree with you? And why are you still convinced that you are right to say that?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, don't watch the news. At least when you're thinking about the long-term prospects of humanity in our long historical perspective, watching the news is the worst thing you could do. The news is tasked with reporting all the bad things that happened. There are no camera crews down at the local school going, here we are, another day without a school shooting. They're only going to go to the place, you don't have this problem in Germany, but in America, it's pretty much every week or two there's a mass public shooting. And that's where the cameras go, of course, that's what they do. So if that's all you watched, you'd never leave your house without your gun or whatever, thinking it's going to be terrible. But in fact, you could go a whole life and never see anything like this happening. so we have to look at statistical trends, and sort of like the global warming curve, it looks like this, right? So the climate deniers go, oh look, there's a downturn, it's getting cold, there's no global warming, it's all a hoax, whatever. No, don't look at the little bumps, look at the long-term trend lines, okay? That's what historians do, and that's what we have to do to project where we're going from where we've come from. Now, we might think of it like that also, of 3 steps forward, 2 back, 3 steps forward, 2 back, and so on, when you have things like Trump, Brexit, the rise of economic nationalism, white nationalism, populism, authoritarianism. Yes, there are a few of those. But it's not like all of a sudden we've lost half the democracies we had a decade ago. It's not like that at all. In many other countries, there's more freedom for, say, women and minorities than there used to be. So we also have to focus on the whole data set, all the different countries, not just the isolated ones, say in England with Brexit, in America with Trump. But even there, you know, Brexit hasn't yet led to the collapse of the EU or England, and Trump hasn't taken America into a nuclear war, and we still have the Constitution. The Democrats just won the House in the midterms, and they're fighting back. The press hasn't been buried or censored. Nope, the press is as strong as it's ever been. You know, Trump pounds on the New York Times, the failing New York Times, that the subscription rate for the New York Times is the highest it's ever been. You know, if I was their subscription director, I'd be going, go Trump, go, keep pounding on us. This is great for sales. Okay, so yeah, although it's disconcerting sometimes that he runs the country on Twitter, this too shall pass, and we'll be okay.
Okay. Thinking of the title of your book, The Moral Arc, I think when you use a picture, of course, you always have to be aware of its implications. And an arc goes up, but it also goes down when it has reached its highest point. And are you sure we are still on the ascending part of the arc? Yeah, no. So as a metaphor, the arc, of course I get this from Dr. King, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Okay, there's no there for the arc to get to. Think of it as a asymptotic curve in science, where it's bending ever upwards, but it's starting to flat down, and it's going to always kind of just be always slightly climbing. And in the case of, you know, moral progress, there's no utopia that we get to and go, okay, we're done. This is exactly the perfect society. There is no such thing, and there never will be. Okay, I address this in my latest book on utopias. There's no utopia. Protopia, the last chapter of The Moral Arc, is called Protopia. This is Kevin Kelly's neologism to describe slow, gradual, incremental progress. Let's just try to make tomorrow slightly better than today. And today was slightly better than yesterday. That's it. Don't worry about like 500 years from now we're going to reach utopia. If you aim for that, you're going to end up with disaster and catastrophe. That's what dictators and autocrats and theocrats have always done, and they fail because there is no utopia, right? So the curve is just it's kind of jagged and climbing, but just don't worry about the way out there. Just get right there, tomorrow. Let's just go for tomorrow. Okay. What are, in your opinion, the most probable scenarios for the future of mankind? Does it have one at all? The future of mankind, yes. Well, I'm pretty optimistic in that regard. I think it's very unlikely that any of the scenarios presented by doomsayers, and here I'm not talking about religious ones that Jesus is going to come, and I'm talking about the secular ones like AI, terrorism, nuclear war, climate change. These are all things we should be concerned about and address, but none of them, the possible exception of nuclear war, could lead to the total extinction of our species. At worst, it would be catastrophic in terms of the numbers died. Might take a while to recover, but we would. Even that we should be concerned. We don't want that to happen. But the scenarios that are presented, you know, like the end of civilization, no, that's not going to happen. We're not going back to the Dark Ages. I don't think that's going to happen. In any case, one of the best things we have done as a species is solve problems.
You know, so we address the problem, we identify the problem and go, okay, what do we got to do? Like we did this with the ozone hole back in the 90s. Like, okay, this is discovered in the 80s, we better do something about it. Let's ban chlorofluorocarbons and so forth. We did it. Okay, we're in good shape there. We can do that with climate change. Much bigger problem. But, you know, all electric cars, getting rid of the burning of fossil fuels, these kinds of things, it's going to happen anyway. So here's an idea that few people ever can understand. We will never run out of oil. Okay, let that just sit there for a second. We will never run out of oil. How can that be? We live on a finite planet. At some point, we're going to suck out the last drop of oil. No, we're not. Because at some point, if there's so little oil left, it will be so expensive to get it out and process it, no one's going to do it. It's not going to be economically feasible. As they say, the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. Okay, we're just going to find better technologies, and we're already doing that, thanks to Elon. And I drive one of his little electric machines, and it's great. And this is where we're going. By 2050 or so, all cars will be electric. We won't be burning fossil fuels anymore. You'll go to a private racetrack to drive one of those old muscle cars with the V8 engines, just as recreation. But out there, you know, gazillion people driving their cars, or gazillion miles. It's going to be all electric. Okay, now that's not going to solve it completely, but I think one of these little 2 steps back is this reversal from nuclear power because of the Fukushima thing. Again, it's this irrational fear we have of the unseen, the unknown. Nuclear, you can't taste it, smell it, see it. It's got radiation. You know, I'm distressed that you guys, Germans, have pulled back from more nuclear power because that's the future. You know, it's just the number of people that have died in nuclear accidents, none in America, only, you know, just a couple of these disasters that have happened, compared to the number of the people that die from coal mining or, you know, just the byproducts of burning fossil fuels. It's, you know, astronomically higher. Why are we obsessed with worrying about nuclear power when so many more, and climate change itself is a product of burning fossil fuels? We got to get off fossil fuels.
There is something to look forward to for all the people who will like your moral arc that has now been published in German. This year you have published another book which has not yet been translated to German. In that book you write about the question of an afterlife from a scientific point of view. And so please let us have another spoiler at the end of this interview. Is there an afterlife?
Is there an afterlife? Well, obviously, I don't know for sure, and no one does. But if we treat it like a scientific claim, or a claim of any kind, the Null Hypothesis tells us we should say, no, there isn't, until somebody proves otherwise. So I'll tell you what, you go there and come back and let me know. But I don't recommend like actively doing this. In other words, although we don't know for sure, there's no evidence that there is an afterlife, so we should assume that there isn't and live our lives accordingly, by which I don't mean nihilistic, meaningless, purposeless lives. No, quite the opposite. We should treat every day and everything we do and every relationship we have as like this is the last day. Therefore, I should make the most of it and treat it as the most special thing I have. In case there is no tomorrow. Now, if it turns out there is, like my friend Deepak Chopra, Shermer, you're going to this, returning to the state of consciousness. I'll see you there. Okay. If it's true, fine. Okay, that's great. I'm not against that, but I'm not going to bank on it. Okay, and then pretend like this is all a temporary staging before the big show in the next theater. You know, I don't think we have any evidence for that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.